Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a big day as we implement the biggest tax cut. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I expect I shall have further such meetings later today.
We know who he really is. Before he was found out, he's reported to have said he's handsy. That's the problem. Pincher by name, pincher by nature. Now, has the Prime Minister ever said words to that effect? And I'm not asking for bluster and half-truths. We've all had enough of that. Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to trivialise what happened.
No denial. And he says the matter was resolved when he means it was upheld.
Exactly.
And they're all sitting there as if this is normal behaviour. When that young man reported his attack to a government whip, she asked him if he was gay. When he said that he was, she replied, "That doesn't make it straightforward." That comment will sicken anyone who's experienced sexual assault and then be made to feel like they somehow asked for it, or who worry that prejudice means their complaint won't be taken seriously. Will he apologise for those disgraceful comments on behalf of his government?
Mr. Speaker,
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused, and it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
Mr. Speaker, look, he talks about. He should hear what his lot say about him, Mr. Speaker. He talks about integrity. He wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10, Mr. Speaker. That's what he wanted to do. Imagine what our country and what the world would be like now.
What a pathetic spectacle. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Have some self-respect. Every day the lines he's forced them to take have been untrue. First, that he was unaware of any allegation. Untrue. Then he was unaware of any specific allegation. Untrue. Then he was unaware of any serious specific allegation. And now he wants them to go out and say that he simply forgot that his whip was a sexual predator. Anyone with anything about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the middle of a crisis, doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding dogs?
Mr. Speaker, it's easy to forget that only 10 days ago the Prime Minister was dreaming of a third term. Mr. Speaker, you know, it's often said that a week is a long time in politics, but it turns out that 10 days is truly a lifetime. Because, let's face it, it's a minor miracle that the Prime Minister has even made it through to Prime Minister's questions, and he really ought to see the faces behind him, because, Prime Minister, it really is over. The Prime Minister is desperately clinging on to his own fantasy. How many more ministers need to quit before he finally picks up his pen and writes his own resignation letter? Perhaps that's what he's doing now. You know, a few weeks ago I compared the Prime Minister to Monty Python's Black Knight. Actually, turns out I was wrong. He's actually the dead parrot. Whether he knows it or not, he's now an ex-Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given, or if I felt, for instance, that we were being frustrated in our desire to support the Ukrainian people, or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going.
According to the NHS Confederation, not a single one of the so-called 40 new hospitals the Prime Minister promised at the last election will be built by 2024. Two of those new hospitals are in my constituency. Hammersmith opened in 1902 and Charing Cross opened in 1818. They're not new hospitals and there's no building going on. Like all his promises, they exist only in his warped imagination, as this is likely to be his last Prime Minister's questions. Will he finally tell us the truth?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table, but there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night. And then also to the victims that drink was the problem. Isn't it the example, Mr. Speaker, but it's the Prime Minister constantly tries to deflect from the issue, always tries to blame other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
Order. The Prime Minister once wrote, "It is a wonderful and necessary fact of political biology that we never know when our time is up. Long after it is obvious to everyone that we are goners, we continue to believe our duty is to hang on to the perks and privileges of our posts. In reality, we are just terrified of the come down." So for the sake of this great country, will the Prime Minister heed the advice of his former self, get over his terror and do the decent thing?
Mr. Speaker, given that the Prime Minister doesn't like walkouts and strikes, what legislation will he be introducing to stop further walkouts and strikes amongst his cabinet colleagues and junior ministers?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the whole House will have observed the brilliant performance on the radio this morning by the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. And that's no disrespect to the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, but what I think it shows, Mr. Speaker, is that in common with many sectors of the UK economy, there is a ready supply of skilled labour in the upper reaches of the Conservative Party.
David Davis.
6 months ago, I called on the Prime Minister to resign because even then it was clear that his approach to leadership and integrity was already creating a pipeline of problems that would paralyse proper government. Today, I ask him to do the honourable thing, to put the interests of the nation before his own interests, and before, in his own words, it does become impossible for government to do its job.
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much for the point that he's made again. I've just got to, I just couldn't disagree with him more.